I'm curious, what do you think the world would look like if more people started practicing kitchen witchcraft again?
We'd be less hungry, that's for sure. There'd be a lot more food to go around, very, very tasty food. I mean, to see more people practicing witchcraft in any way, I think would be largely beneficial. I think that witchcraft gives us means for accessing anti-capitalist perspectives that we don't really have in Christianity and Western mysticism in a lot of ways. I think it gives us ideas of community and interconnectedness that we don't also see in a lot of the Abrahamic religions.
Hello, mystics, and welcome to the Occult Unveiled. This week, we have a delicious show for you with Melissa Madara, a professional chef, the co-owner of Catlin Books in New York, and a kitchen witch who recently wrote The Witch's Feast, a kitchen grimoire, one of my favorite witchy books. Hello, Melissa. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I've got a tarot deck with me, and I open my shows with a tarot reading. Would you be interested in one?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I want you to think of a question that you need an answer to right now. Do not tell me what it is. Just let me know when you have it in your head.
I do.
Okay. The first card is what you know about the situation, which is the Ace of Cups reversed. Oh, we're laughing, so this is real. A lot of emotional difficulties here, a lot of tears when the tears come out of the cup and upside down, not a good sign. So emotionally, you know that you've had a lot of trouble getting what is an abstract idea off the ground, or it's caused a lot of emotional turmoil internally. Here's what you don't know about the situation. The Six of Cups. Interesting. So we have another cups, water, emotion. The Six of Cups is usually a very loving card. We see giving, we see sacrifice and joy. But when it's upside down here, it's showing that the situation that you are involved in, you're not realizing the give and take isn't even. You're not realizing that no matter how hard you're pushing this, you can't force someone to be as loving as you are. And here's the advice from Spirit. The Nine of Pentacles reverse. Get yourself stable. Get yourself grounded, get yourself in a place where you are feeling confident in yourself again so you can make that next move.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I'm so glad that resonated.
Totally. Yeah. I'm actually working on my second book right now. And my question was mostly in relation to how the rest of the project is going to go. We're sending in the manuscript at the end of this week, and then we're moving into the photography stages. Wow. I was hoping to have some time for like personal fun this summer, but from the reading, it sort of sounds like it's going to be work time. That upturned cup in particular, I don't know if you've ever had like a book project or something like that before, but after any big creative outpouring, the cup is empty.
I completely understand. Yeah.
I'm at the point where like the cup is at the end, but I have so much more to go. So I've got to keep, sticking to the practical work. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. What is the new book that you're working on?
It's actually going to be a companion to the first. So the first book was The Witch's Feast. Thank you so much. And we dealt with kitchen witchcraft and food recipes in that book. The second book is The Witch's Workshop. So it's going to be dealing with botanical crafting, mostly like ink making, incense making, natural dye, all of that stuff from a magical perspective. So I've been digging through old grimoires and books of magic to find like specific spells and specific charms that relate to those crafts and help people make stuff. Yeah. So it's all about making your own magical tools.
That is so cool. And, I think what I really loved about the book that you wrote, The Witch's Feast, is that it's so much deeper than any of the other kitchen witchery books that I had read. And I know that comes from your background as a chef. So don't make fun of me, but I tried making one of your recipes.
And how'd it go? Which one was it?
I made little sigil biscuits. Sigil. A type of symbol used in magic. The term refers to a pictorial signature of a deity or spirit. In the modern usage, sigil refers to a symbolic representation of the practitioner's intention. So,
oh wow, that's so pretty.
Oh, you think so? Thank you. Another priestess and I made them together. They are, we didn't make our own dough, but it's mixed with lavender, rosemary, and then the on top is honey mixed in with some butter to give it that nice top flavoring.
Beautiful. I love that.
So we
that's great. They did come out so cute, and you can clearly see all of the sigil shapes, which is the whole point. Yeah.
So when we were eating them, it was really funny. I was like, I don't really need more air before I'm going to bed right now, but here I am eating the air symbol.
Did you have any weird dreams as a result?
I did have weird dreams. I dreamt that I was in middle school, the place no one wants to be.
Of course.
But the cookie or the biscuit really was supposed to be a protective energy, right? Because we used the rosemary, and it was very sweet. So when I went to bed and I was dreaming about like middle school and like standing up for myself. So I totally feel like that energy really sat with me. And so while we're on the show, I'm going to have a little taste of Taurus.
Yeah, get your snack on. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's so great. It makes me feel so good when I see people interacting with the recipes and like really making them their own. That's how I wanted to make a lot of them, so they could be like broken down and reapproached and tailored to your practice. That's sick. I love that. I love that you got that together. When you said that the book was a lot deeper than other kitchen witchcraft books that you've read, that's the reason that I wrote it. It's because it wasn't deep so much because I'm a chef, because that doesn't necessarily give you a lot of like occult information about cooking, but it was deep because I had read other kitchen witchcraft books so many times, and I had thought to myself, wow, this is nothing. It's the same fluff information repeated between books, where it's a lot of sympathetic correspondences and energetic movements, like sort of like the ritual movements, spinning your coffee widdershins or something like that. But there wasn't really a lot of historical context beneath that showed you applications for this tech. And so I started hunting, and I put together some classes on that subject, and those classes became the book. So it was really born out of like a desire for like, let's go a little deeper than the other kitchen witchcrafts books do. I
love that. My favorite part of the book, first of all, Aleister Crowley was a chef. He liked making rice, and like you have these recipes. I'm going to try to find it in here. And I was like, what? I had no idea.
Aleister Crowley. Ashley, how many times are you going to make me explain who Aleister Crowley is? As many times as it takes, Pythian. As many times as it takes. Aleister Crowley, the most well-known and one of the most important occultists of the modern era. He was a ceremonial magician who founded the religion of Thelema.
He thought he was an expert in kind of everything, didn't he?
He really did, yeah.
That recipe, he was like, I want the shops in London to pick this up. And I was like, really, Crowley? He also describes it as being incredibly spicy when it has like a pinch of curry powder and a little bit of cardamom. So kind of speaking to the Victorian. It's very tasty though. It's nice like cardamom pistachio. The
other thing I was really impressed with was you have each of the zodiac signs here. So I'm a water sign, and I'm actually allergic to milk enzymes. And you have here in the book that Pisces in particular are not very favorable to milk products.
Yeah, that is true. That was one of the hardest chapters to write because there isn't a lot of historical precedence for food correspondence among the planets and the zodiac signs. There's a bunch of references for herbs and crystals and other materia magica, but not food specifically. So a lot of that came down to my own experimentation, looking at the planetary correspondences and the astrological medicine correspondences. But then it became filling in the gaps with like, does this ingredient have the right experience of Taurus?
Right.
Does it exemplify aspects of Taurus? And then it became, whether or not this is historically correspondent with Venus, does it give me Taurusiness?
I completely understand.
Yeah. A lot of conversations with other occultists where I had to be like, how do you feel about this? You as a representative of this sign,
Well, it's peer reviewed.
The Scorpio Feast was written by my friend who's a Scorpio. And I really worked with him on that one. He's a bartender. So it has like a cocktail dessert in it. It's a blood orange sorbet and a few ounces of Fernet Branca. So like nice and bitter, but sweet, really, really tasty. So I had a lot of fun with that chapter. That's probably the most experimental of the chapters in the book.
Yeah, you really had to dig and do your own kind of in-depth research. Oh, this is our guest star, Euphrates. He's my cat.
Hi, baby. I'm sure you'll hear my cats screaming their heads off in the other room. Whenever I close the door, which is like high crime in the house.
It is.
You'll hear, the union rep will be sent to speak with me loudly. So you hear the howling of my children.
It's so precious. So did you dive into like, because I know it says in here that you spent, you have like a Mediterranean, Eastern European background, but did you look into like, what were those reference books to find the information about the zodiac and the planets?
Sure. So my heritage is evenly split between Pennsylvania Dutch on my father's side and I'm Croatian on my mother's side. So definitely my research interest is around the Mediterranean because that's where my ancestry is rooted. So most of my personal research is going to be into ancient religions along the Mediterranean coast. I spent a lot of time in ancient Greece, a lot of time in ancient Rome, and earlier civilizations for those places. So you will find some recipes from the book from that time. The recipe that didn't quite make it into my book, but is still super exciting to talk about from that text. So there's a spell from the PGM, which, just if your listeners aren't familiar with the PGM, it's a book of ancient Greek, Roman, and Egyptian magical spells that comes from around 300 BC to like 100 AD, kind of the general region. And there's a spell in there for making a cheesy bread that will get someone to confess if they're telling you a lie. You bake a little simple cheesy bread and you consecrate it, and then you feed it to them and ask them a question. And if they are telling you an untruth, they will choke on the bread. I know. One of my favorite kitchen witchcraft spells from ancient Greece. I love that one so much. So there's a little.
That's so cool because you never hear that.
No, you don't. And so when you're looking kind of broadly for like specific examples of kitchen witchcraft in history, you're not going to find a lot because it is really marginalized, I think, in a historical tradition of looking at magic. I think when a lot of people look at a magical history, they're very interested in like the high ceremonial magic, and kitchen witchcraft can almost feel too mundane to be sort of in the same class of charms. And there's also something to be said for like an inherent sexism in the way that we marginalize like women's work in the kitchen. There's sort of this inference that like there's a sharp separation between the magic of old wives' tales and folklore.
Old wives' tales, a traditional belief often passed down through generations based on folklore or superstition rather than scientific evidence.
So that's very, very mundane and rooted in the everyday life. And then the high ceremonial magic, which gets all the glitz and all the glamour and all the,
the secrets.
Secrets and the historical preservation that the other stuff just doesn't. And I definitely think there's something to be said for the fact that that domestic sphere is the sphere of women, which is historically always marginalized.
I agree. I remember reading, I don't recall which reference source, but the kitchen is an altar space. It's a very sacred space. And that's where you're preparing your life source. And in the old days when we didn't have Trader Joe's to easily run to, food was a very precious resource, and breaking bread or sharing a meal with someone was literally sharing life force.
Absolutely. When we look at the structure of ancient Greek religions and even earlier, the hearth is really the center of the religious cult of the home. In a lot of ancient religions too, it's not just the stove or the hearth area, but also the pantry, which is where the house spirits would have been located. So these are really like the beating heart of the religious center of the home. All of your sacrifices, whether they have to do with food or not, would be happening at your oven because that's where fire is contained. Fire being sort of symbolic of larger spiritual influences. It's also the place where you can safely burn your sacrifices, which, is important to do for performing these kinds of magic. So when people are performing magic at their home, they wouldn't have necessarily had a separate altar like we do now in the modern world. They would have just used the stove. Because that's where they can burn everything really safely within the house, or even within the pantry where little statues to the Penates might have been. That's definitely preserved for most of human history. But once we get to the Middle Ages, where we see women just cut down even further and really, I hate to keep using this word, but really removed from public life and being marginalized within the kitchen, we see the importance of this space within the home and really the importance of domestic life in general fade from the public sphere. And it's almost like it's no longer a part of the conversation when it used to be the center of personal religion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I completely resonate with that. Like the center of the home. And in a lot of ways in modern life, it still is. Now, we might not have the same kind of nuclear family structure, but the kitchen is literally the life force of the house. And in some traditional South American practices, not in Southern America, but in like the South of America, we have practices that resonate from traditional African practices where you have to keep a clean stovetop in order to allow prosperity to come in. If your stovetop's dirty, you're done for.
The sacredness of the kitchen space is so well preserved within African traditions. It's really beautiful to watch. And I mean, even when you look at like Ifa and the emphasis on cauldrons for your work, literal, like, and it's
right.
Specifically cookware. It's not the sort of stylized cauldron that we're used to in like Western paganism. It's specifically cookware that's used. And the emphasis on feeding people and feeding your spirits. There's such a prominence of kitchen work preserved within that tradition. I didn't get to write about it much because I'm not a practitioner of those traditions. And I feel kind of strange, like speaking for them when I'm not actively.
I understand.
But
of course,
it's so rich. There's so much well preserved there that's just so tossed to the side in Western occultism. So a big part of the book was like really bringing kitchen witchcraft out of the dust and out of the shadows and presenting it again as like legitimate magical practice that deserves a much deeper look historically, practically from modern practitioners than it's gotten in decades.
Right. And it gives it, like you said, it gives it kind of legs and that historical background, because it's not just, and this is totally valid, you can throw things together that correspond and make your own dish. But when you see the lineage of it, it really gives it more prominence and more respect in ways that things like ceremonial magic definitely have.
For sure. And one of the other things you get from studying history, which is the reason like so much of my other work with like my Patreon and all the classes that I teach is focused on the historical perspective, is because you also get examples of praxis.
Praxis, an application of theories, beliefs, or ideas into real-world actions.
You get to look at how people have done it in the past. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, it could work like that. Like I get lots of ideas for how my spell work could go just by studying ancient spells. I might not necessarily be able to complete all of them. Like, let's say they involve like cow eyeballs. Like I can't get that.
Yeah.
But when we update it for the modern world, we can look at sort of the tech pieces of it and kind of break it down and figure out how it works. And that gives us more information, not just about those particular charms, but also about how magic works, which is one of the reasons I love studying occult history.
And what I love about this too is that it is so easy for a non-practitioner who may feel overwhelmed or confused by the planetary elements or even just the zodiac to say, oh, I can break down the themes. I understand what the herbs are for this specific holiday or this specific zodiac sign. And I see how it all fits together, because that's really what magic is. You're taking a lot of different pieces to create a masterpiece. And for my research, that took a long time. I really had to pull from different resources. And now in the 2020s, we have beautiful books like this that lay it out so much easier. And I'm so excited for those people diving into it.
That's what I wanted it to be, was like, if this is your first book on magic, how can I make it not hokey and also something that gives you a really good foundation? You know, whether you want to become a Wiccan or something else or whatever you want to do with your path beyond the book, you can still take this and make it adaptable to whatever it is you want to do. And it's a good practical foundation in how magic works, which is hard to do in a kitchen witchcraft perspective, because there isn't so much good quality writing on that. But is that the Zodiac chapter, I believe? Yeah.
This is the Feast of the Heavens, and it talks about all.
Maybe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this was so hard for me to find. That wasn't like struggling in other ceremonial works that, like, as a beginner, I didn't really have a lot of information on. Mm-hmm. And you lay it out so well. But I do have one question. You have a chapter in here about moon cycles and cooking with the moon cycles.
Moon cycles. Moon cycles refer to transitioning phases of the moon as it orbits the earth.
Can you explain that a little bit? I think a lot of young witches are very interested in the moon. And how does that affect our cooking?
I mostly think about using the moon cycles in my practice as a form of astrological election. So when we're doing astrological magic or planetary magic, these things can really help us plan the timing of our work. And we want to be creating talismans and doing our magical work at the most opportune time when the planets that are most helpful to us are well positioned. So, for example, when we're talking about the lunar cycle, we've got those two sort of climaxes, right? The full and the new, both sort of having different aspects of the same cohesive energy, whereas the new is sort of the shadow aspect, the like deep obscurity of the dark moon phase. I mostly use that as like a divination, center within my work when we're sort of just peering into the blackness and getting some information back. And the full phase, of course, being used a lot for creating talismans, for generative works, sort of just very, very broad strokes. And so in my practice, if I'm doing magic that's going to be towards a generative end, towards creating something in the world that doesn't currently exist, I might do that in accordance with the full moon when it's in a positive aspect, when it's in the sign of like a Venus ruled sign like Taurus or something like that. Great time to do moon magic. So I'm using it mostly to plan the timing of my work so that I'm operating within the most optimal like astrological conditions.
I see.
Yeah.
And because for younger, maybe not as, beginner witches, they could say, okay, so all of these planets are affecting me and it affects everything here on Earth, the tides, the way that certain plants are going to grow. So when you even like, if you wanted to get really deep into this, I just started my own herb garden. So I want to be able to like pick my herbs at particular times and cook with them at certain times.
Oh, there is.
It goes all the way down.
Yeah, there's so much historical emphasis on picking your herbs by the moon cycles. I'm actually doing a 5-week plant magic class right now, and tomorrow is going to be our magical gardening class. So we're going to be talking a lot about that, picking plants by the moon, sowing plants by the moon, all of that. There's even some charms for waiting for particular moon phases to bless the water that you water your plants with.
That makes sense. I get it. It makes sense. That's so cool. So what do you think it would be like in our imagination, what would it be like to have a kitchen witchery restaurant? Is that even possible? Because we're working with all these different moon phases and different planet phases. Could we do it?
Absolutely, we could. I mean, would be sick if true. I can't believe no one's done it yet. I've thrown some like full moon dinners and some like feast rituals in New York, but I haven't done anything like that before. We absolutely could, to be working within astrological currents that are beneficial for people. It would be hard to pick a specific intention for the magical work to sort of align with, since everyone's going to be coming to the restaurant with their own ideas. But maybe what if you could pick off a menu and say, oh, I'd like the love spell dinner, please. Or I'd like the money magic dinner, please. Wouldn't that be great?
That would be so cool.
Yeah.
I think
the entire ritual is
really
eating
special.
the food. That's it.
It sounds so fun. So these cookies, right? They're made with the honey. So the honey, I'm very particular about my honey because I have really bad allergies. And so the bees in my local area will help me build immunity. But when I taste it, it's so sweet and it mixes perfectly with the rosemary and a little bit of pepper, which is a very protective spell. And that's really what I want. And I can imagine like how much fun that would be just to savor the food. In our world, we eat food so fast. We just shove it in our faces. We don't take time to really appreciate and feel the energies coming into our bodies.
Yeah, and it no longer in the modern world sort of feels like the same kind of level of necessity that I think it's had for most of human history. We think of food as a given, you know what I mean? And for most of human history, it hasn't been. It's been something that you need to struggle to provide and something that really forms the basis for what your life is oriented around. You know, let's say you're a farmer, which most humans have been throughout history. Your life is food. Your livelihood is food. And for most of us in the modern world who work in tech or something like that, I mean, I think about a lot of the tech folks who eat things like Soylent.
Soylent. Soylent is a meal replacement product brand that provides complete nutrition through convenient and easy to consume drinks or powders.
Sounds very dystopian, Pythian.
It does, and you may also be thinking of the 70s sci-fi movie Soylent Green. Spoiler alert, it's made of people.
and sort of like the milkshakes that are just nutrients and no experience. I personally couldn't live that way. It's not for me.
Yeah.
Definitely a
I don't
foodie person.
think I could either.
But it also sort of detaches you from the experience of nourishing and being nourished, and from the fact that, food is an aspect of the natural world around us from which we are inextricable, right? So
absolutely.
we no longer live in a world where there's a two-way relationship between humans and food, I guess is what I'm trying to say, where we're interacting with the land and giving to the land to generate production. Most of us only relate to food as sort of an extractive source. Very, very different.
Yeah.
It's funny how quick that transformation happened, sort of only within the last 200 or 300 years.
Yeah, it really did. It was so fast, and it left a hole, I think, in our society in a way that, especially when it comes to, so I'm my boyfriend will call me a flexitarian. So when I'm on my moon cycle, I eat meat because I need the iron.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of the time, when you go and you buy meat from a grocery store, the honor of the sacrifice of the animal has been lost as well. And you have a lot of meat recipes in here. And I think that's important to give honor to the animal that gave its life to nourish you.
Absolutely. I lived in India briefly when I was right in college. And I had a friend over there who was a Tibetan monk. And I was talking to him one day over dinner where he was eating a bunch of lamb. And I was like, how does that figure into your cosmology, where you've got this emphasis on respect for living beings, and yet you consume them? And that was sort of where I was first introduced to the idea of the ethical harvest, that we have to, that we are able to kill these things that we respect because it is required, but we do so in such a way where we're causing the least amount of harm possible. And Sering actually offered to take me to a goat slaughtering to kind of get my taste for what that was. And I went and I threw up twice. And I
bet
I couldn't handle. I was a vegetarian for 6 years after that. But just like you, I actually do need the iron. I'm anemic, so I don't thrive on a purely vegetarian diet. And so it's made me really interrogate that relationship between consumption and violence, and where I want to fall on that scale. How I can do honorable harvesting in a world where I don't have access to the way these animals are treated, to the way their lives are, the harvesting conditions. So that's made me relate to meat in a way where I'm only buying exactly what I need, no more. I'm not really keeping it in the house unless I feel like I need to. And I'm making sure that I'm buying from reputable dealers that I know are treating these animals with the kind of, dignity that I would like to relate to. So I'm not sort of part of...
And it's hard.
Yeah, incredibly hard. We live in a world where there's no transparency about food harvesting, even with vegetables. We don't know the conditions under which they're grown. We don't know whether or not they've been exposed to specific pesticides or this or that. And so it's hard to make informed decisions about food. It's weird how the food industry is so occulted, to use our favorite word.
So hidden, yes.
From us. So to uncover that
really
is a really it's a deep practice of intentionality, to reconsider and reframe our relationships to food if we choose to kind of pick it up as a magical tool.
When I was in high school, I was dating a first generational Cuban man.
Nice.
And his family for New Year's roasted a pig on a spit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not prepared for that. I was not prepared for what it smells like in the blood. And it's you really do. You gain a different appreciation rather than buying this very strange kind of packaged pink meat from the grocery store.
Mm-hmm. And almost
it's very different.
When you get it, it's sort of stripped of all the liveness of it. It's stripped of the blood, it's stripped of the flesh, and it's just given to you in this usable pink goo that you don't have to really confront the reality that a creature had to die. And again, that doesn't bother me anymore. I grew up with a Croatian family that would do the lamb on the spit. So I'm used to
you know it.
Chasing me with the eyeball. Oh yeah. Slavic people love to roast an animal. And for those cultures, which are very agrarian historically, there isn't any problem confronting the death of the animal. These are also societies where they've been heavily repressed politically and, repressed economically. So there's just a lot of death in general. And so there's a very different relationship to death in the Slavic cultures than there is in Western Europe or, anywhere else.
You just reminded me of a story. So my great aunt, she was over in Thailand. So her late husband was a builder for Hilton Hotel. And when they went over to do land scoping in Thailand, she was brought to it was basically an ambassador dinner, and she was given eyeball soup. And she's trying so hard to be culturally respectful, but she tells me the story. She's like, the soup was looking back at me, and I tried one of them because it's supposed to be good luck. And in Thailand, eating eyes is a sign of good luck. And she said it was a salty grape, and then I threw up. I was like, oh,
poor thing. Yeah, there's other cultures have relationships to different parts of animal food.
The body. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which to us in the West is like body horror, right? To eat an eyeball.
Totally.
But for them, it's like, we need the nutrition. This part
exactly
has quite a bit. And so there's a different to me, that's like more in line with the ethical and honorable harvest, where
I agree.
Yeah, you're looking at the entire creature and saying, let's maximize what we get out of this. Let's preserve this as much as possible, treating it really like a gift. I think about that a lot in the way that humans relate to nature, kind of in broad strokes, the way that we even look at plants as which ones are valuable and which ones are weeds to be eradicated, even when they might be nutritionally beneficial, medicinally beneficial to the environment in ways that don't involve the human perspective,
like dandelions. You have a couple of dandelion recipes in here. And I was like, oh yeah, dandelions have a lot of nutrition, but they are seen as weeds.
Completely marginalized. Yeah. And that's sort of like how humans have related to the natural world in the West, like post-Christianization for like thousands of years. I was just teaching a class on plant mythology, and we looked at some artwork that depicted Christian heaven and included a lot of plant iconography. And mostly we see like fruits and flowers happening concurrently, which doesn't happen in the natural world. The flower has to come first. But it's this sort of idealized nature where there's nothing brambly, there's no undesirable plants. It's just fruits and flowers being tended to by little gardening cherubs. And that is really the Western ideal of nature. We even get this biblical connotation of like man subduing nature as an effort in subduing evil, right? We have God giving dominion of nature to humans, and we have to subdue nature if we want to subdue the devil. So we have this connotation between nature as it actually exists and evilness. So there's this really cleaning up of nature, this sanitizing. And we have that in the modern world in our relationship to food so much. Especially in the West. I mean, we don't really have that in other countries, especially in the third world. We don't even have that in Eastern Europe, where I'm from. But yeah, it's definitely a foreign perspective for the Western consciousness to be thinking about preserving the harvest of an animal in such a way that you might eat its, undesirable,
right? Like, so you have chicken foot soup here.
Yes.
So I lived with two wonderful young women from China, and they introduced me to chicken's feet for the first time. And, that's something that, especially in America, I was like, chicken finger, because they would do this, you want chicken finger. And I was like, chicken finger? Yeah, I love chicken finger. I love chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Chicken finger.
Oh, man.
But it really does have like the way that in Chinese culture that they use food as medicine. And that really inspired me to learn how cooking is this experimental creative expression and magical expression. And it's different in every culture, and everyone has access to it. It's not something that you're closed off to. And I love learning that, like, the broth of chicken is so helpful to you. That's where we get the myth of it's not a myth, it is true. Chicken noodle soup does help the common cold. Absolutely. And the feet here can protect you. And you say here that it even can help like remove like the evil eye and stuff like that. I think that is incredible.
Think about the chicken foot charms that we see in hoodoo and rootworks. My chicken foot symbol in my hand.
Chicken foot, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the guy from Scary Movie, but okay. Yes. But the way we see chicken foot charms in hoodoo and rootwork, where because chickens are known for scratching up things in the backyard, they can be useful in alerting you to dangers. They can be useful in uncovering secrets, stuff like that. I found that was a useful symbol, a useful icon for protective magic. And chicken feet also make a superior soup. Like I struggle to eat the flesh of the chicken foot. So in the recipe, I think I roast them first to give a really good flavor. So they're mostly kind of like for the stock, but they make a more gelatinous broth, which I know is like a gross word in the Western consciousness, but in soup cultures around the world, you want a gelatinous broth. Like think of like a ramen broth that when it's solid is just a wiggly, gel. Instead of
exactly.
That's a good broth, So definitely makes a superior soup in addition to, the martial qualities that it brings to protective magic.
Right. Yeah, it's very like nutrition dense, I think is the word that I would use there.
For sure.
I would say that's definitely the most intense, the most intense one that I've seen in this book. Now you also have a tea in here that I really want to make. Tea is such a special kind of, it is food and drink. And then I think teas and like what we put in our body, we put so much sugar in our bodies, or white granule sugar, but being able to drink something like this cleansing iced tea looks amazing. Yes. And I definitely will be making some.
It felt really like reductive to make such a simple beverage, a simple recipe. But I tried to pick ingredients that had both the medicinal and magical correspondences of being cleansing and purgative to the body, very detoxifying plants that are also used traditionally in cleansing magic. So we get that sort of like two-handed approach. It's good for you medicinally, it's good for you magically, kind of playing on the fact that a lot of these ingredients get their magical associations from, extrapolations of their botany, from what they can do medicinally, what kind of compounds they have, and what they're known for as far as just common use. That's where we often get a lot of our magical correspondences from. So this recipe kind of highlights that really beautifully.
Yes, you've got hyssop, lavender, rosemary, lemon, peppermint, like all of these are very cleansing, and they're very like you say, like we could burn rosemary, but drinking it as well is very I love iced tea, so I'll be making that.
For sure. Yeah, that's a nice one for summertime too, especially, with, I don't know where you're at in the world. We've had all the wildfire smoke here, and we've had a bunch of just like toxic situations. I mean, living in New York City is a toxic situation. So to have something like that, which is a nice sort of beverage or elixir to like push those out of the body while doing your other energetic cleansing work, to incorporate a beverage like this within a ritual context, I think would just be a great addition. And again, those simple kitchen witchcraft tricks that, like you said, even though we have this emphasis on food as medicine in most cultures throughout the world, we also find kitchen witchcraft traditions in most cultures throughout the world. And yet
we do.
In all of them, they're kind of marginalized. They're not really considered magic in the way that, again, high ceremonial magic is, or other forms of magic that are more, I guess, occult coded, or much more magical feeling than something as simple as making a cheesy bread that someone chokes on if they're lying to you, which to me is so magical.
It's so magical. That's so intense. That's so intense.
Yeah.
Like someone choking in front of you, like literally choking on their words. Like that's a lot. It reminds me of this quote that one of my mentors told me. He said, "I hate the word supernatural. Everything is magical." And that includes the herbs. It includes the cooking. Everything you do has a ripple effect in the world. Absolutely. So my boyfriend and I, we like to go to different restaurants, and he'll tell me, we'll go somewhere, very simple recipe, like best food I've ever tasted because abuelita made it with love. But we'll go somewhere, maybe a fast food restaurant. He's like, whoever made this sandwich had a miserable day, and I can taste it and I don't feel good.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
So your energy goes into creation, and that's so special. So kitchen witchery absolutely should be at the same level as, in my opinion, ceremonial magic, because it affects you just the same way.
And I love what you said about this sort of doing away with the idea of supernatural. When you get into kitchen witchcraft, you sort of destroy that binary between the mundane and the super mundane. Everything becomes magical work. Simple things like adding salt at specific times and specific directions to your food becomes a magical act. And we sort of destroy this idea that there's a difference between sacred space and not sacred space. Within kitchen witchcraft, it's all sacred space. The pantry where I keep my crackers is sacred space. Everything I move through, my dish towels are ritual tools. And not in sort of just like a set dressing sense, not in just like a, oh, you know, wouldn't it be nice? No, it actually is. When the witch picks it up to use it, it becomes a magical tool. You know what I mean?
I absolutely do.
Yeah, someone was asking me recently, like, what would a kitchen witchcraft practice look like to you? And I'm like, we're already doing it. The only thing that we need to do is claim it as a magical practice. We're already doing it on a medicinal level, on an energetic level, you know, all this other stuff. When we as witches pick up those tools and say, I am using them for magic, that's when it becomes a magic practice.
Yes. And I heavily emphasize that with my students too, saying that you are the magic. These tools that you have, the crystals, the tarot cards, those are tools. And as soon as you pick them up and start putting your energy into it, that's when they become magical.
Oh, completely. So, I was just listening to a podcast on, I think, Glitch Bottle with Frater Ocker talking about the new book, Goetic Atavisms. And they were kind of bringing up this question of like, if you were the first magician, so no predecessors, no books, no training, no tools, no oils, no candles, how would you go about doing magic? And it sort of takes this approach of looking at magic from you are the only ingredient that you need, and everything else is just the manipulation of materia. Everything else is just stuff. And I think that's what like kind of is the equalizer between kitchen witchcraft and all other traditions. When we look at kitchen witchcraft, it's so humble because those are the tools that people have on hand. But it's very much of that same, you know, body-based, goetic-based approach where you're using what you have to make the influences in the world that you need to make the changes that are required of you.
Yeah. And just because it's humble doesn't mean it's not powerful.
Exactly. So it's kind of odd that it's something that doesn't really get a lot of scholarly study and it doesn't really get a lot of interesting research. You know, we have so many other topics that do, and yet kitchen witchcraft is always sort of relegated to like folklore and old wives' tales and like dusty Wiccan books with weird mooncakes and stuff. Those recipes are not good in like the 90s kitchen witchcraft. Or they're very of a time. There's a lot of, I talk about this in my classes. They're very, there's a big correlation between neo-paganism in the 90s and medieval revivalism. And so we have a lot of medieval recipes showing up as magical food. Which is interesting perspective, that just because something is old, it might be more magical. But the medieval period also has like the worst flavor palette.
I know. I was going to say, ghoul is not yummy. What are we doing?
Of, like yeasted pastries made with dried fruit. And I'm like, you guys.
Is that a fruitcake? Sounds like a fruitcake. No, thank you.
Like mooncake or soul cakes for All Souls Day are, you know, usually medieval flavor palette. And it's not my favorite. So I tried to have some more modern recipes in my book that get us out of the pagan food era, because I'm not a big fan of the pagan food era.
I get that. And, you know, for people who may feel like nervous about baking or cooking, because that's something that's not really taught as much in our culture as maybe it used to be. I'm very blessed that in my younger years, I did go to not as the extensive culinary school you did, but I went to like home economics 101. So I have some idea on how to cook. But for other people who maybe are nervous about their practice, the best thing that you can do to just get started is, one, give yourself permission to mess up and know that it's going to be okay. Even if it maybe doesn't taste the best you tried, but also to give prayer, honor, and reverence to the recipe and to the ingredients that you're using. There's some really interesting, I'd have to pull it up. I studied it in undergrad. People who pray over their food, like actually do have more, it's not nutritional value, but they feel fuller and they feel more, I guess the word I would use is like light. They feel more enlightened.
You know, I feel like there's a correlation between that study and the one where you speak kindly to a plant or speak meanly to a plant and it'll grow.
Right.
according to how you do it. Both of those studies sort of feel like the same level of like energetic intention breeds positive results. For people who are nervous about cooking, even as a professional chef, I still try new things that don't always work out. And that's just a part of being a cook. So I even when I was a professional chef working in a big production kitchen, I'd have to constantly remind myself, it's just food. It's just food. It's you can always remake it. The ingredients are not that expensive. It's just food. So there's that piece. And then there's also something for like the best way to do it is just to begin the process.
Yes.
The best way to get into cooking is just to begin cooking. Start with simple things that you know. And also because of the fact that we all eat constantly all day long, I like to think that everyone's a food expert. You know what tastes good.
I love that. Yeah.
You don't need special training to know what good food is. You might need special training to learn specific techniques, but like you can make good food by stirring, and everyone knows how to do that.
We
so
sure do.
everyone's kind of a food expert by virtue of eating constantly all day long. So you already have more tools than you think you do.
Yeah. Do you have any other advice for people who want to start kitchen witchcraft? Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we start to wrap up?
Sure. I think and this is something that I like to bring to all of my students. I think that the most valuable consideration you can make in building your practice or incorporating new tools into your practice is to remain sort of within, for lack of a better word, the animist perspective, where you're looking at the ingredients as not simply materia for your consumption, but beings that you're in collaboration with. So much of witchcraft is forming these inspirited relationships with our materia and with our outside world. And when you place any practice within that context, whether it's kitchen magic or divination or gathering plants and having a garden, they take on new life and deeper meaning when you put them within that context. So trying to keep your kitchen witchcraft practice outside of the commodification of food, outside of the capitalism of the food industry, and really grounded within, again, that spirited animistic perspective, that'll make it easier for you to integrate a lot of these tools in a meaningful way.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm curious, what do you think the world would look like if more people started practicing kitchen witchcraft again?
We'd be less hungry. That's for sure. There'd be a lot more food to go around. Very, very tasty food. I mean, to see more people practicing witchcraft in any way, I think would be largely beneficial. I think that witchcraft gives us means for accessing anti-capitalist perspectives that we don't really have in Christianity and Western mysticism in a lot of ways. I think it gives us ideas of community and interconnectedness that we don't also see in a lot of the Abrahamic religions. So to see more people engaging with those ideas in a meaningful way through food would be fucking incredible. It might even give us new routes for tackling like food scarcity crises. I'd be interested to see what that does for like social problems around food. You know what I mean? For having more people have a community perspective around food generation and, food production. I think that'd be fabulous.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think it could really do a lot of healing for our society.
For sure.
Melissa, where can our followers find you on social media, and where can they buy your wonderful book?
Thank you so much. The book can be found in most places. It's distributed through Penguin Books. So Barnes & Noble will have it, Walmart will have it, Amazon will have it. You can buy it directly from my publisher when you go through Watkins Press. It's Watkins in the UK. They're one of the oldest occult bookshops out there. So it's really, really great spot. I love them very much. Most of my work is going to be organized through my brand name, which is Moon Cult, one word. I've got a website where you can find all my classes coming up. I've got a Patreon where you can subscribe and read more of my like in-depth research and writing and listen to my little podcast that I run. We're only like 3 episodes in, so it's like not really announced, but I've got a little podcast on there. And then my Instagram, which is the only social media that I keep because I hate social media very much, is saint.jayne, which is my middle name. So you can find me on there and keep abreast of sort of everything that's going on.
And our co-host came to say goodbye too. So goodbye, ladies. So Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a pleasure. I love kitchen witchery. I love your approach. And I think, our followers and listeners have a lot that they can learn from you. So thank you again.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
And until next time, mystics, stay magical. The Occult Unveiled is produced by F Street Productions and M is for Magic. Our executive producers are Ashley Ryan, Michael A. Simon, and Scott Kushner. Our show is produced by Deborah Simon. Our audio producer is Bill Schultz. Our talent booker is Perry Turcott. Laura Kaufman is our coordinator. Thank you for listening, and for more information on any of the topics you heard today, plus really cool links and ways to learn about Ashley, Pythian, and all of our guests, go to theoccultunveiled.com website. The Occult Unveiled, copyright 2023.